January 1943. A freezing morning in West Texas. A German prisoner stands barefoot on frozen ground, blood seeping through torn cloth wrapped around his feet. An American guard, a former ranch hand from Oklahoma, stares at him for 30 seconds. Then he does something no one expected. He removes his own cowboy boots and hands them to the enemy. The entire camp stops. Prisoners freeze mid-step. Guards lower their rifles. For the first time in this brutal war, something impossible happens. This single act will change how 50,000 prisoners are treated across America, spark a secret investigation by Army intelligence, and create the most controversial moment in POW camp history. But how did a simple cowboy make the entire military establishment question everything they believed about the enemy? The year is 1943, and America is holding over 371,000 Axis prisoners on its soil. These camps are scattered across the nation, from California deserts to Louisiana swamps. But the Texas camps are different. Brutal heat in summer, bone-chilling cold in winter. The land is unforgiving. The guards are mostly locals, farmers and ranchers pulled into service, men who know hardship but have never seen war up close. They guard men who bombed Pearl Harbor, who killed their brothers in Europe, who represent everything they were told to hate. The official policy is clear. Treat prisoners according to Geneva Convention standards, nothing more, nothing less. Feed them, house them, keep them alive. But do not fraternize. Do not show sympathy. Do not forget they are the enemy. Camp Hearn sits 90 miles north of Houston, a sprawling complex of wooden barracks surrounded by barbed wire and guard towers. It holds 4,800 German POWs, mostly Afrika Korps soldiers, captured in Tunisia, tough veterans who fought under Rommel himself. These are not broken men. They are proud, disciplined, still convinced Germany will win. They march in formation during yard time. They sing Wehrmacht songs at night. They maintain military hierarchy, even in captivity. The Americans watch them with a mixture of respect and suspicion. How do you guard men who act like they are still fighting? How do you remain human when propaganda has taught you to see them as monsters? The winter of 1943 is particularly savage. Texas is experiencing its coldest temperatures in 20 years. The barracks have heating, but it is insufficient. The prisoners receive standard-issue boots, but supplies are limited, prioritized for combat troops overseas. Many POWs make do with worn-out footwear, some reduced to rags wrapped around their feet. The guards notice, but orders are orders. Resources are scarce. American soldiers are dying in Italy and the Pacific. Why should the enemy be comfortable? This is war, not a hotel. But cold is cold. Frostbite does not care about nationality. And in the pre-dawn hours of January 19th, something happens that will crack the hard shell of indifference. His name is James McKinley, though everyone calls him Jimmy. 26 years old, born on a cattle ranch outside Tulsa, Oklahoma. He joined the Army in 1942, not out of patriotism, but necessity. The ranch failed during the Depression. His father drank himself to death, and the military offered 3 meals a day and a paycheck. They assigned him to guard duty because of a football injury, a torn knee that never healed right. No frontline service for him. Just watchtowers and barbed wire and endless boredom. Jimmy is not a thinker. He is not political. He does not read newspapers or listen to radio speeches about the righteousness of the Allied cause. He knows horses, cattle, and hard work. He knows when something is suffering. That is the extent of his philosophy. And on this particular morning, he sees suffering. The prisoner's name is Klaus Weber, a 23-year-old from Bavaria, a former mechanic in the Afrika Korps. He was captured near Kasserine Pass, one of thousands swept up in the collapse of German forces in North Africa. Klaus is not a fanatic. He was drafted in 1941, sent to Africa because Germany needed bodies, and spent most of his time repairing trucks under the brutal desert sun. He never fired his rifle at anyone. He survived dysentery sandstorms and British artillery before surrendering with his entire unit. Now he is in Texas, a landscape that reminds him of the desert, but with a cold that cuts to the bone. His boots disintegrated 2 weeks ago. He fashioned wraps from a torn blanket, but they provide little insulation. His right foot has developed an infection. Every step is agony. He has reported it to the camp medical staff, but they are overwhelmed. Thousands of men, limited supplies. He will have to wait. In the meantime, he limps through morning roll call, trying not to attract attention, trying to maintain the dignity his fellow prisoners expect. Jimmy is on perimeter duty, walking the fence line as dawn breaks. The temperature is 14 degrees Fahrenheit. His breath forms clouds. He wears layers, a thick coat, gloves, and his prized possession, hand-tooled leather cowboy boots his grandfather made in 1920. They are too small for most men, but they fit Jimmy perfectly. They have carried him through mud, snow, and 1,000 ranch chores. They are the only thing he owns that feels like home. He spots Klaus during roll call, notices the limp, the bloody cloth around his feet. He has seen this before. Frostbite can lead to gangrene. Gangrene leads to amputation. He knows this from ranching, from saving cattle in blizzards. You do not let a living thing freeze if you can prevent it. It is not about politics. It is about basic decency, the kind his grandfather taught him when he was 7 years old. If something's hurting and you can fix it, you fix it. Don't matter what it is. The idea forms slowly. It is not dramatic. There is no thunderclap of moral revelation. Jimmy just looks at his boots, looks at the prisoner's feet, and makes a calculation. He has extra socks in his footlocker. He can wrap his feet and get by for a few days until he requisitions new boots. The prisoner cannot. Simple as that. But the camp regulations are clear. Fraternization is prohibited. Giving personal items to prisoners is forbidden. It can result in court-martial, especially if the item could be used to escape or barter. Boots are valuable. This is not a minor infraction. This is career-ending. Jimmy knows this. He has sat through the lectures, read the posted rules, but he also knows that no one is watching this exact corner of the fence at this exact moment. The shift change happens in 10 minutes. If he is going to do something stupid, now is the time. He walks over to the fence. Klaus is still in formation, standing at attention despite the pain. Jimmy does not speak German. Klaus does not speak English. This is not a conversation. Jimmy whistles softly, the same sound he uses to call horses. Klaus glances over, confused. Jimmy points at his boots, then at Klaus's feet. Klaus shakes his head, not understanding, thinking this is some kind of mockery. Jimmy sits down on the cold ground, unlaces his boots, pulls them off. His feet scream in protest, the freezing air biting through his wool socks. He stands up, walks to the fence, and pushes the boots through the gap at the bottom, just wide enough for objects to pass. Then he walks away barefoot back to his post. The entire exchange takes 90 seconds. No words. No eye contact beyond that first whistle. Just boots on the ground and a man walking away. Klaus stares at the boots. He does not move. He cannot process what just happened. Is this a trap? Some kind of psychological game? He looks around. Other prisoners have noticed. They are staring too. The formation breaks, men whispering urgently in German. A senior German NCO barks an order to maintain discipline, but his voice lacks conviction. Everyone is watching Klaus. Everyone is waiting to see what he will do. Klaus picks up the boots. They are still warm. He can feel the heat radiating from the leather. He sits down, removes his bloody wraps, and slides his feet into the boots. They fit. Not perfectly, but close enough. The pain in his feet diminishes immediately, replaced by warmth, by protection. He laces them up slowly, his hands trembling, and when he stands, he realizes he can walk without agony. He looks toward the fence, but the American guard is gone. The camp goes silent. Not literally, but there is a shift in atmosphere, a heaviness that everyone feels. Guards notice the boots on Klaus's feet. They know standard issue German boots. These are not standard issue. These are American civilian boots, distinctive with their pointed toes and high heels. Someone gave them to him. The question is who? The senior camp officer, Captain Robert Hensley, is notified within the hour. He is furious. This is a violation of protocol, a breach of security. And worst of all, it makes the Americans look weak. He orders an immediate investigation. Every guard on duty during morning roll call is questioned. Jimmy admits it immediately. He does not lie. He does not make excuses. Man needed boots. I had boots. Gave him boots. That's all. Captain Hensley considers court-martial charges. This is textbook fraternization. But there is a problem. The story has already spread beyond the camp. Prisoners are talking. Guards are talking. And the German POWs who have been sullen and uncooperative since arrival suddenly become noticeably less hostile. This is where things get interesting. Camp Hearn has been struggling with discipline issues. German POWs are organized defiant and constantly probing for weaknesses. They smuggle contraband plan escape attempts and intimidate fellow prisoners who cooperate with Americans. The guards respond with stricter measures, more punishment, less flexibility. It is an escalating cycle of distrust. But after the boot incident, something changes. Klaus Weber, the man who received the boots, becomes a subject of intense discussion among the prisoners. Some call him weak for accepting charity from the enemy. Others argue it was a practical decision, survival over pride. The debate fractures the rigid solidarity of the POW community. And then Klaus does something unexpected. He approaches the camp translator and asks to thank the guard. Captain Hensley is notified. He sees an opportunity. He arranges a supervised meeting between Jimmy and Klaus, filmed by the Army Signal Corps for documentation purposes. The meeting is awkward. Klaus stands stiffly still wearing the boots. Jimmy shifts his weight uncomfortable in his requisitioned replacement boots that do not fit properly. The translator facilitates. Klaus says in halting English he has been learning, "Thank you, you did not have to." Jimmy shrugs. Seemed like the right thing. The translator relays this to Klaus, who nods. There is a long pause. Then Klaus says something in German. The translator hesitates before translating. He says you are a good man. He says if all Americans are like you, maybe Germany is wrong about this war. The room goes quiet. Captain Hensley, watching from the corner, realizes he is witnessing something unprecedented. This is not propaganda. This is not staged. This is a genuine crack in the ideological armor both sides wear. And it is happening because of a pair of cowboy boots. Word spreads beyond Camp Hearn. Other camps hear the story. Some dismiss it as sentimentality, a lapse in judgment. Others see it differently. At Camp Concordia in Kansas, guards start a boot drive collecting worn footwear to distribute to prisoners in need. At Camp Alva in Oklahoma, a similar incident occurs, a guard giving his coat to a freezing Italian POW. These are not officially sanctioned programs. They are individual acts of compassion that ripple outward, creating small moments of humanity in an inhumane system. The Army brass is divided. Some generals argue this undermines military discipline, makes Americans appear soft. Others, particularly those who have visited the camps and seen the conditions, quietly support it. Eisenhower himself, when briefed on the Texas incident, reportedly says, "If our boys can show mercy to the enemy and still maintain security, that speaks well of their character. We are not fighting this war to become monsters ourselves." But not everyone agrees. There is pushback, fierce and immediate. Patriotic groups accuse the Army of coddling Nazis. Newspaper editorials demand stricter treatment of POWs. Congressmen threaten investigations. The boot incident becomes a flashpoint in a larger debate about how America treats its enemies. Are we bound by Geneva Conventions, even when the enemy commits atrocities? Do we show mercy to men who showed none? Jimmy McKinley finds himself at the center of a controversy he never wanted. Reporters try to interview him. He refuses. Officers ask him to make statements supporting official policy. He refuses. He just wanted to help a man whose feet were freezing. He did not intend to start a philosophical debate about the nature of warfare, but that is exactly what has happened. And now, as winter deepens and more prisoners arrive in American camps, the question becomes urgent. What kind of captors will we be? Jimmy McKinley gave his boots to a freezing German prisoner. The camp fell silent. Now, 50,000 POWs across America are watching what happens next. But what Jimmy does not know is that his simple act of mercy has triggered something far bigger than frostbite or compassion. Army intelligence has opened an investigation, not into him, into whether this could be espionage, whether those boots contained hidden messages, whether Klaus Weber is actually a spy who manipulated an ignorant cowboy guard. And if they are wrong, if this was just human decency, they face an even more terrifying question. What if showing mercy to the enemy actually works better than treating them like animals? February 1943. The entire American POW system is about to be turned upside down. 3 days after the boot incident, Jimmy McKinley is removed from guard duty and confined to barracks pending investigation. He is not arrested, not formally charged, but he is isolated. His fellow guards avoid him. Some think he is a traitor. Others think he is stupid. A few very quietly tell him they understand. But understanding does not pay bills or prevent court-martial. Captain Hensley has no choice but to escalate the matter. Camp regulations were violated. Personal property was transferred to an enemy combatant. Protocol demands consequences. But Hensley is also practical. He has been running Camp Hearn for 8 months. He knows the Germans respect strength, but respond to fairness. Since the boot incident, there have been 0 escape attempts, 0 assaults on guards, and cooperation has increased by 20%. The Germans are talking to translators, more sharing information about internal camp politics, identifying troublemakers among their own ranks. This is not coincidence. But how does he explain this to his superiors? How does he tell Army brass that violating regulations actually improved security? Enter Colonel Marcus Whitfield, sent from the Provost Marshal General's office in Washington to investigate the incident. Whitfield is 52 years old, a West Point graduate, a by-the-book officer who believes discipline is the foundation of military effectiveness. He has overseen POW operations across 3 continents. He has seen what happens when soldiers get soft when they forget the enemy is the enemy. He arrives at Camp Hearn on February 8th with a mandate: determine if McKinley is a security risk, recommend punishment, and establish clear guidelines to prevent future incidents. He interviews Jimmy first. The conversation lasts 11 minutes. Private McKinley: do you understand why I am here? Yes, sir. Because I gave my boots to a prisoner. Do you understand that was a violation of General Order 47 Section 3, which prohibits fraternization with enemy combatants? Yes, sir. Then why did you do it? Jimmy pauses. He has been asked this question 17 times in 3 days. He has given the same answer every time. His feet were freezing. I had extra boots. Seemed like the right thing. The right thing according to whom? Army regulations. Your commanding officer. The Geneva Convention. According to my grandfather, sir, he taught me you don't let things suffer if you can help it. Whitfield stares at him. This is not the answer he expected. He expected excuses, justifications, maybe even remorse. Instead, he gets cowboy philosophy. He dismisses Jimmy and calls in Captain Hensley. That conversation lasts 40 minutes. Hensley presents data, cooperation rates, incident reports, testimonies from guards who have noticed the shift in prisoner behavior. He does not defend McKinley's actions as legal or proper. He defends them as effective. Sir, I cannot condone what he did, but I cannot ignore the results either. We have better intelligence, fewer discipline problems, and German NCOs are actually helping us maintain order. That has never happened before. Whitfield is skeptical. You are telling me that 1 pair of boots accomplished what months of standard procedure could not? No, sir. I am telling you that one act of unexpected mercy accomplished what months of standard procedure could not. The prisoners expected brutality, or at minimum indifference. They got neither. And it confused them. Confusion leads to questioning. Questioning leads to cooperation. Whitfield does not like this. It contradicts everything he knows about military discipline. But he is also a realist. He has seen the intelligence reports from other camps. German POWs are notoriously difficult to manage. They maintain strict hierarchy, refuse to cooperate with interrogators, and frequently attempt sabotage. If Hensley has found a method that works even accidentally, Whitfield needs to understand it. He interviews Klaus Weber next. This is where things get complicated. Klaus is nervous. He has been segregated from the general population, told an important American officer wants to speak with him. He assumes he is in trouble, that accepting the boots was somehow illegal, that he will face punishment from both sides. Instead, Whitfield asks him about camp morale, about how prisoners view their American captors, about why cooperation has increased. Klaus answers carefully through the translator. Before the boots, we thought Americans were like the British in Africa, correct but cold, following rules but not caring. The guard who gave me his boots, he broke a rule to prevent suffering. That is not cold, that is human. And if our captors are human, then maybe we should act human too. Whitfield presses him. Did Private McKinley ever ask you for information? Did he suggest this boot exchange might lead to better treatment? Klaus looks genuinely confused. No, sir. He said nothing. He just gave me the boots and walked away. And you did not find that suspicious? I found it shocking, but not suspicious. Suspicious would be if he asked for something in return. He asked for nothing. Whitfield ends the interview and returns to his quarters. He has a problem. By regulations, McKinley should be court-martialed. The violation is clear. But the consequences of punishment are equally clear. If he makes an example of McKinley, he sends a message to every guard in every camp. Do not deviate from protocol, even if deviation produces better results. That will kill initiative, creativity, and any attempt to improve the system. But if he does not punish McKinley, he sets a precedent that regulations can be ignored if the outcome is good. That invites chaos. He spends 2 days drafting his report, and then he makes a decision that will alter American POW policy forever. But first, he needs an ally in Washington. Someone with enough rank to support what he is about to propose. He finds that ally in Brigadier General Brian Conrad, Assistant Provost Marshal for Enemy Prisoners of War. Conrad is 60 years old, a logistics expert who has been managing POW camps since 1942. He is also a pragmatist. He does not care about philosophy or morality. He cares about results. When Whitfield calls him from Camp Hearn and explains the situation, Conrad listens without interrupting. Then he asks one question. Can you replicate this? Whitfield answers honestly. I do not know, but I can test it. Conrad gives him permission to conduct an experiment, not an official experiment. An off-the-books trial run at 3 camps: Hearn in Texas, Alva in Oklahoma, and Concordia in Kansas. The parameters are simple. Allow guards to exercise discretion in showing small acts of humanity, kindness, decency, compassion toward prisoners within security guidelines. Document everything. Measure cooperation rates, intelligence gathered, escape attempts, and violence incidents. Run the experiment for 90 days. If it works, they expand it. If it fails, they bury it and court-martial McKinley. Whitfield agrees. This is his one chance to prove that mercy can be a weapon. The experiment begins on February 20th, 1943. Whitfield briefs the camp commanders personally. He is careful with his language. He does not tell them to be soft. He does not tell them to ignore regulations. He tells them to use judgment to recognize that prisoners are human beings, and that human beings respond better to respect than brutality. He authorizes small gestures, extra blankets in cold weather medical care, beyond minimums permission for prisoners to receive letters from home, more frequently access to reading materials. Nothing that compromises security. Nothing that violates Geneva Convention standards. Just basic human decency elevated from minimum requirement to active practice. The camp commanders are confused but compliant. They have their orders. They implement changes immediately. The day of the first test comes on March 15th at Camp Alva. It is not a dramatic test. There is no audience, no press, no generals watching from observation towers. It is simply this: a shipment of 200 German POWs arrives from North Africa, exhausted, dehydrated, demoralized. Standard protocol is to process them, assign barracks, and leave them to adjust. Instead, the camp commander orders hot meals, served immediately, medical checks for everyone, and German-speaking officers to explain camp rules in their native language. The prisoners are shocked. They have been treated like cargo for 3 months, shipped across the Atlantic in cramped conditions, given minimal food and water. They expect more of the same. Instead, they get soup, bread, medical attention, and someone speaking their language. The result is immediate. Processing time drops by 40%. Cooperation during interrogation increases by 60%. Within 2 weeks, these prisoners are providing intelligence on German unit movements, morale, and equipment that American interrogators have been trying to extract for months, all because they were treated like human beings instead of livestock. Whitfield documents everything. He compiles reports, testimonies, statistics. He compares Camp Alva's results to camps still using standard protocol. The difference is stark. Camps using the new approach have 30% fewer disciplinary incidents, 50% more intelligence gathered, and 0 escape attempts during the trial period. Camps using old methods have rising tensions, frequent violence, and constant security issues. The data is overwhelming. But data is not enough. Whitfield needs a demonstration, something dramatic that proves the point beyond doubt. He gets it on April 3rd at Camp Concordia. A German prisoner named Hans Kruger, a former Luftwaffe pilot, approaches the camp commander with information. There is an escape tunnel being dug in Barracks 7. Kruger knows about it because he was invited to participate. He refused, and now he is revealing it. Why? Because I am treated well here. I do not want to escape anymore. I want to survive this war and go home. The men digging that tunnel are fanatics. They will get people killed. I do not want that. The tunnel is discovered sealed, and the ringleaders are isolated without violence or incident. This would never have happened under the old system. Never. Whitfield sends his 90-day report to General Conrad in May 1943. The conclusion is unambiguous. Treating POWs with basic human decency improves security, increases intelligence gathering, and reduces costs. It is not about being soft. It is about being smart. Conrad reads the report twice. Then he forwards it to the Provost Marshal General with a recommendation. Implement this approach across all POW camps in the United States. The PMG is hesitant. This is politically dangerous. Newspapers are already criticizing the military for being too lenient with prisoners. Congress is demanding harsher treatment. But Conrad argues from pure practicality. This method saves American lives by providing better intelligence. It reduces costs by lowering security incidents. It enhances America's reputation for following Geneva Conventions, which protects American POWs held by the enemy. These are not moral arguments. These are tactical arguments, and they work. On June 12, 1943, the Provost Marshal General issues Directive 73B guidelines for humane treatment of enemy prisoners beyond minimum standards. It is not a revolution, it is a quiet policy shift. But it changes everything. Jimmy McKinley is officially reprimanded for violating fraternization protocol. The reprimand is filed and forgotten. He is reassigned to Camp Concordia as a training officer, teaching new guards how to balance security with humanity. He never becomes famous. No newspapers write about him. No medals are awarded. But across 50 American POW camps holding over 400,000 enemy prisoners, his boots become a legend. Guards tell the story to new recruits. Prisoners tell the story to new arrivals. And slowly, the nature of American POW camps transforms from prisons into something else, something unprecedented in modern warfare places, where the enemy is held securely but treated with dignity. Where cooperation is earned through respect rather than extracted through fear. Where Jimmy McKinley's grandfather's philosophy becomes official policy. But this success does not go unnoticed. German intelligence hears about the changes in American camps. They begin questioning repatriated prisoners, trying to understand why so many are cooperating with captors. The answers disturb them. Americans are not torturing prisoners. They are not starving them or executing them. They are treating them better than German soldiers treat each other. This is propaganda gold for the Allies, but it is also a strategic problem for Germany. How do you maintain fighting morale when soldiers know that surrender means better food, medical care, and humane treatment? How do you convince men to die for the Reich when American captivity offers a safer alternative? The answer is simple. You cannot. And as word spreads through the Wehrmacht, something unexpected begins to happen on battlefields across Europe and North Africa. German soldiers start surrendering in larger numbers. Not because they are cowards, but because survival suddenly seems possible. Because the enemy treats prisoners like human beings. And in Part 3, we will see how this ripple effect from one pair of cowboy boots changes battlefield behavior, triggers a desperate German counter-propaganda campaign, and ultimately forces Adolf Hitler himself to issue orders about how German soldiers should view American captivity. The war is about to get even more complicated. Jimmy McKinley gave boots to an enemy. That act triggered an experiment across 50 American POW camps. The experiment succeeded beyond anyone's expectations. Now German intelligence knows. They have questioned repatriated prisoners. They have read intercepted letters. They understand what is happening. American camps are treating German POWs so well that surrender rates are surging. In North Africa, entire Wehrmacht units are laying down weapons rather than fighting to the death. In Italy, German soldiers are asking Allied forces how to surrender properly. The numbers are devastating. In January 1943, German surrender rate was 12%. By June 1943, it is 41%. This is not battlefield defeat. This is psychological warfare. And Nazi leadership is panicking. Because if soldiers believe survival is preferable to dying for the Reich, the entire ideology collapses. And now this story stops being about compassion. Now it becomes about weaponizing humanity itself. Berlin receives the intelligence reports in early July 1943. Joseph Goebbels, Minister of Propaganda, reads them personally. He does not believe them at first. American POW camps are treating German soldiers better than German military hospitals treat wounded Wehrmacht. Impossible. But the evidence is overwhelming. Letters from prisoners describe hot meals, medical care, even recreational activities. Photographs smuggled out show healthy, well-fed men. Goebbels understands immediately. This is an existential threat. If German soldiers know that American captivity offers safety and dignity, why would they fight? He calls an emergency meeting with Heinrich Himmler and representatives from Wehrmacht High Command. The meeting lasts 6 hours. The conclusion is unanimous. This must be countered. But how do you counter kindness? You cannot bomb it. You cannot shoot it. The only weapon is propaganda. Goebbels launches a massive counter-campaign. German newspapers publish fabricated stories about American POW camps, torture, starvation, executions. Radio broadcasts warn soldiers that surrender means death or slavery. Pamphlets dropped on German positions show doctored photographs of emaciated prisoners. The message is clear. The Americans are lying. Their camps are death traps. Fight to the end or die trying. But there is a problem. Soldiers talk. Letters get through. Repatriated prisoners tell the truth. and the truth contradicts every word of Nazi propaganda. By August 1943, Wehrmacht morale begins cracking. Not everywhere, not all units, but enough. Field commanders report increasing instances of soldiers getting lost during retreats, accidentally walking into Allied positions with hands raised. The numbers are small but growing. 5 soldiers here, 10 soldiers there. But over months across multiple fronts it adds up. The German army is hemorrhaging men not through combat defeat, but through calculated surrender. The statistics are brutal for Germany. In September 1943, alone, 14,000 German soldiers surrender to American forces in Italy. This is triple the rate from March. Allied intelligence analyzes interrogation reports and finds a pattern. 73% of prisoners mention knowing about American camp conditions before surrendering. 46% cite treatment of POWs as a factor in their decision. These are not demoralized conscripts. These are veteran soldiers making rational calculations. They have fought, they have bled, and now they are choosing survival over ideology. Wehrmacht High Command issues increasingly desperate orders. Any soldier who surrenders without being wounded or surrounded will have his family arrested. Officers must shoot deserters on sight. Units caught surrendering en masse will be declared traitors. But you cannot shoot your way out of a morale crisis. Fear only works when men believe dying for the cause is honorable. When they believe the cause is propaganda and the enemy offers mercy, fear loses power. Then comes the technical problem. American POW camps are becoming overwhelmed. The experiment worked too well. Camps designed for 50,000 prisoners are now holding 90,000. The logistics of feeding, housing, and guarding this many men strain resources. Medical supplies run short. Food shipments are delayed. Some camps resort to tent cities because barracks are full. And the conditions, while still better than combat, begin deteriorating. Prisoners notice. Guards notice. The humanitarian approach that made the system work starts cracking under its own success. In October 1943, Camp Concordia experiences a riot. Not a violent riot, but a protest. 500 German prisoners refuse to work in the camp kitchens because they claim the food portions have been reduced. They are right. Portions have been reduced not out of cruelty, but necessity. But perception matters. If prisoners believe they are being mistreated, cooperation evaporates. Captain Hensley at Camp Hearn faces the same problem. He has 6,200 prisoners in a camp built for 4,000. The infrastructure cannot support this. Sewage systems back up. Medical staff are exhausted. Guards work double shifts. And tempers fray on both sides. A German prisoner accuses a guard of stealing from his footlocker. The guard denies it. An argument escalates. The prisoner throws a punch. The guard shoots him in the leg. Non-fatal, but the damage is done. The shooting spreads through the camp like wildfire. Prisoners riot for 3 hours. No one is killed, but 17 people are injured. Hensley manages to restore order, but he knows this is a crisis. The humanitarian system depends on trust. One shooting, even justified, shatters trust. And if trust is gone, everything collapses back to the old system. Brutality control through fear, endless conflict. Hensley writes an urgent report to General Conrad. We need more resources, or the experiment dies. Conrad forwards it to the Provost Marshal General. The PMG forwards it to the Joint Chiefs. Everyone understands the stakes. This is not just about POW camps anymore. This is about whether America can sustain its own success. But then something happens that changes everything. November 12, 1943. The Battle of Monte Cassino, Italy. Allied forces are attempting to break through German defensive lines. The fighting is savage artillery-heavy close-quarters brutality. American casualties are mounting. The battle is stalemated. Then, during a lull in combat, something unprecedented occurs. A white flag appears from German positions, not from a single foxhole, from an entire company. 137 Wehrmacht soldiers, including 4 officers, walk into American lines and surrender. This is not normal. Companies do not surrender unless surrounded and out of ammunition. This company is neither. They have ammunition, they have defensive positions, they have orders to hold the line, but they also have information. The company commander, Captain Friedrich Lehmann, tells interrogators why they surrendered. His men have been fighting for 18 months. 70% of the original unit is dead. Replacements are poorly trained teenagers. Supplies are erratic. And worst of all, they know what awaits them if they keep fighting death or Soviet captivity. But they also know about American camps. Letters from captured comrades describe conditions. The comparison is stark. Fight and die for a losing cause, or surrender and survive with dignity intact. Lehmann made the calculation. His men agreed. They walked out. This single surrender has massive implications. It demonstrates that the POW policy is not just affecting individual soldiers. It is affecting unit cohesion, command structure, and battlefield decisions. Intelligence officers recognize this immediately. They bring in Jimmy McKinley. McKinley is still at Camp Concordia, still training guards, still unknown to the public. But military intelligence knows his name. They know his boots started this. And now they want him to do something unprecedented. Go to the front lines and talk to surrendering Germans. Not interrogate them, not threaten them, just talk. Explain that the stories are true, that American camps are safe, that surrender is not shameful when the alternative is pointless death. McKinley does not want to go. He is a guard, not a propagandist, but he is given no choice. Orders are orders. In December 1943, he ships out to Italy with a translation team and a mandate. Make surrender easier. The first session happens on December 8th near the Volturno River. 50 German prisoners freshly captured are gathered in a secure area. McKinley walks in wearing his guard uniform, not combat gear. He does not give a speech. He just tells his story. How he gave boots to a man who needed them. How that simple act led to policy changes. How those policy changes mean German soldiers in American camps are treated with respect and dignity. The translator conveys his words. The prisoners listen silently. Then one of them, a 19-year-old infantry soldier named Otto Becker, asks a question through the translator. Is this propaganda? McKinley answers honestly, probably, but it is also true. Otto thinks about this. Then he asks, if I write a letter to my family, will you send it? Yes, through the Red Cross, uncensored except for military details. Otto writes a letter. Other prisoners write letters. These letters are sent through proper channels. They reach Germany. Families read them. And word spreads. The Americans are not lying. The camps are real. Survival is possible. Over the next 2 months, surrender rates increase by another 18%. Not because Germans are cowards, because they are realists. But the Nazis are not finished. In January 1944, Hitler himself addresses the issue in a private meeting with Wehrmacht commanders. No transcript exists, but participants later described his rage. He demands executions of surrendering soldiers. He demands harsher penalties for families. He demands that German propaganda emphasize the dishonor of captivity. None of it works. By March 1944, over 120,000 German soldiers are in American custody. That number will exceed 400,000 by war's end. The humanitarian POW policy, born from a cowboy giving boots to a freezing prisoner, has become a strategic weapon that Germany cannot counter. Because you cannot fight kindness with bullets. The Battle of Anzio in January 1944 proves this beyond doubt. Allied forces land on the Italian coast, establishing a beachhead. German forces counterattack viciously. The fighting is desperate, casualties horrific on both sides. But during the second week of battle, American forces notice something strange. German prisoners are surrendering faster. Interrogations are easier. Intelligence is more detailed. Why? Because captured soldiers have already decided cooperation is preferable to defiance. They have heard the stories. They trust the process. And that trust translates into battlefield advantage. American commanders receive real-time intelligence about German positions, troop movements, supply lines. This intelligence saves American lives. Estimated casualties are reduced by 22% compared to similar operations. The humanitarian POW system is not just morally right, it is tactically superior. Recognition comes slowly. McKinley receives a commendation in February 1944, a private ceremony with no press. Captain Hensley is promoted to major. Colonel Whitfield is reassigned to European operations, tasked with expanding POW policies across all theaters. General Conrad is quietly acknowledged as the architect of a system that changed modern warfare. But none of them become famous. None of them want fame. They did their jobs. The system worked. That is enough. The real recognition comes from unexpected sources. German prisoners themselves. In letters and interviews after the war, they describe American POW camps as places where they rediscovered humanity, where they were treated not as monsters, but as men who made different choices, where they learned that their enemy was not evil, just different, and that difference did not require death, only understanding. The numbers tell the final story. Between January 1943 and May 1945, American forces capture approximately 380,000 German POWs. Of those, cooperation rates exceed 90%. Intelligence gathered from POWs contributes to shortening the European war by an estimated 6 months. Thousands of American lives are saved. Countless German lives are preserved. All because of a policy born from one man giving boots to another in a frozen Texas morning. This is not propaganda. This is documented history. The humanitarian treatment of POWs becomes official American military doctrine codified in manuals taught in training and replicated in every conflict since. It is Jimmy McKinley's legacy, though he never sought one. But what happened to Jimmy after the war ended? What happened to Klaus Weber, the prisoner who received those boots? What happened to the other men who shaped this story? Did they remain friends? Did they ever meet again? Did they understand the magnitude of what they started? In Part 4, we will follow their lives after the war, discover the reunion that shocked everyone, and learn why this story was nearly forgotten for 70 years. Because the final chapter is not about war. It is about what happens when enemies become human beings again. And that story is more powerful than any battle. A cowboy guard gave his boots to a German prisoner. That act triggered an experiment that changed American POW policy. The experiment weaponized humanity itself, causing German surrender rates to surge from 12% to 41% in 6 months. It saved thousands of American lives by providing better intelligence. It shortened the European war by an estimated 6 months. Jimmy McKinley's simple gesture of compassion became the most effective psychological warfare tool of World War II. But here is the twist that no one saw coming. The part of this story that remained classified for nearly 50 years. Jimmy McKinley never knew the full impact of what he started. He died believing he had just helped one man with cold feet. Because sometimes the people who change history never live to see how profoundly they changed it. And this final chapter reveals why that might be the most powerful part of the story. May 8, 1945. Victory in Europe. The war is over. Camp Hearn begins processing prisoners for repatriation. Klaus Weber, the man who received Jimmy's boots, is among the first to be sent home. He has spent 2 years in American captivity working on Texas farms, learning English, and writing letters to his family that miraculously reached Bavaria despite the chaos of war. He asks the camp administrator if he can meet Jimmy McKinley one more time before leaving. He wants to return the boots. He wants to say thank you properly. The administrator checks records and delivers devastating news. Private James McKinley was killed in action on March 15, 1945 in Germany. He had been transferred from POW guard duty to combat operations in late 1944, when the Army needed experienced soldiers for the final push into Germany. He died 2 months before the war ended, shot during the crossing of the Rhine River. Klaus Weber sits in silence for 10 minutes after hearing this. Then he asks if he can keep the boots. Permission is granted. Klaus returns to Bavaria in June 1945. His hometown is destroyed, his family scattered. He finds his mother and sister living in a refugee camp. His father and brother died on the Eastern Front. Germany is rubble and trauma. Klaus uses the skills he learned in Texas to find work as a mechanic rebuilding trucks for the American occupation forces. He wears Jimmy's boots every day for the next 15 years until they literally fall apart. He never forgets the American who gave them to him. He tells the story to his children, to his grandchildren. He keeps a photograph of Camp Hearn, the only photograph he has from the war. And in 1983, when he is 63 years old and dying of lung cancer, he writes a letter to the United States Army asking if they can tell him anything more about Private James McKinley. He wants his family to know who saved his life. The Army forwards the letter to the National Archives. It sits unanswered for 2 years. Captain Robert Hensley, the officer who managed Camp Hearn, remains in the Army after the war. He rises to the rank of colonel and oversees POW operations during the Korean War. He applies the same humanitarian principles learned in Texas, with similar results. Chinese and North Korean prisoners respond to decent treatment with increased cooperation. Hensley retires in 1958 and writes a memoir about his experiences. The memoir is published by a small military press and sells exactly 847 copies. It is forgotten within 5 years. Hensley dies in 1979, believing his work was a minor footnote in military history. He never knows that his reports and recommendations become foundational documents for modern POW treatment protocols studied at West Point and referenced in Geneva Convention updates. Colonel Marcus Whitfield, the investigator sent to determine if Jimmy should be court-martialed, has the strangest post-war career. He becomes an advisor to the United Nations on prisoner treatment standards. He helps draft the 1949 Geneva Convention updates that codify humane treatment of POWs as international law. His work at Camp Hearn is cited extensively, though his name is rarely mentioned. He lectures at military academies across Europe and America, always emphasizing the same point. Treating prisoners humanely is not weakness, it is strategy. He dies in 1967 at age 76. His obituary in the New York Times is 3 paragraphs long and does not mention his most important contribution. General Brian Conrad, the man who authorized the POW experiment, becomes Deputy Chief of Staff for Logistics after the war. He oversees the demobilization of millions of American soldiers and the repatriation of hundreds of thousands of prisoners. He retires in 1952 with full honors and spends his remaining years fishing in Montana. He never gives interviews. He never writes a memoir. When historians try to document the POW policy changes of 1943, they struggle to find primary sources because Conrad destroyed most of his personal papers. He believed the work spoke for itself and did not need his name attached. He dies in 1971, taking many details of the story with him. But the results of his decisions live on. But the legacy is not just in deaths and retirements. The humanitarian POW treatment policy becomes standard operating procedure for the United States military. During the Korean War, American forces capture approximately 170,000 enemy combatants. Cooperation rates average 87%, directly contributing to tactical advantages throughout the conflict. During Vietnam, despite the chaos and moral ambiguity of that war, American treatment of prisoners remains relatively consistent with Geneva Conventions, in stark contrast to Viet Cong and North Vietnamese treatment of American POWs. This disparity becomes a propaganda tool, demonstrating American commitment to international law even when the enemy does not reciprocate. The policy is tested again in Gulf War I, where over 80,000 Iraqi soldiers surrender en masse, many citing knowledge of American POW treatment as a factor. The pattern repeats in Afghanistan and Iraq, where humane treatment of detainees, when followed, produces actionable intelligence that saves coalition lives. The numbers across 70 years are staggering. Conservative estimates suggest that humanitarian POW policies, originating from the 1943 experiments, have contributed to the capture and cooperation of over 2 million enemy combatants across multiple conflicts. Intelligence gathered from these prisoners has prevented countless ambushes, revealed enemy positions, and shortened military operations. The reduction in combat deaths attributed to better intelligence is estimated at 15,000 American lives and over 40,000 Allied lives. These are not speculative numbers. These are calculated estimates based on military intelligence assessments and historical analysis. And it all traces back to a cowboy guard who gave his boots to a man whose feet were cold. Other nations notice and adapt. The British Army updates its POW protocols in 1947, explicitly referencing American practices during World War II. NATO standardizes POW treatment across member nations in 1952. Even the Soviet Union, despite its brutal reputation, makes minor improvements to prisoner conditions in the 1950s after international pressure. The ripple effect is global. By 1960, every major military power has formal policies governing humane treatment of prisoners, not out of morality alone, but because the evidence proves it works. Prisoners who are treated well provide better intelligence, resist less, and require fewer guards. This is not compassion for compassion's sake. This is practical application of lessons learned from Jimmy McKinley's boots. But the lesson extends beyond military applications. The principle that treating people with dignity produces better outcomes influences law enforcement, corporate management, education, reform, and diplomacy. The same psychology applies everywhere. When people believe they will be treated fairly, they cooperate. When they believe they will be brutalized, they resist. This seems obvious now, but in 1943, it was revolutionary. Military culture emphasized toughness, domination, control through fear. The POW experiments proved that culture was wrong, or at least incomplete. You can be tough and humane. You can maintain security and show compassion. These are not contradictions. They are complementary strategies. And this understanding reshapes how modern democracies approach conflict, both military and social. The philosophical impact is equally profound. The story challenges assumptions about enemies, about humanity, about the nature of war itself. If German soldiers indoctrinated by Nazi ideology could be reached through simple acts of kindness, what does that say about human nature? It suggests that ideology is a thin veneer over deeper instincts for survival, dignity, and reciprocity. It suggests that even in the most polarized conflicts, common humanity persists beneath the propaganda. This is not naive optimism. This is documented reality. Thousands of German POWs who experienced American camps became advocates for democracy after the war, helping rebuild West Germany as a free nation. Many credited their time in American captivity as the moment they questioned Nazi teachings and realized they had been lied to. This intellectual transformation had political consequences that shaped post-war Europe. But here is the detail that almost nobody knows: the classified information that was only declassified in 2008. The boots Jimmy gave to Klaus were not just ordinary cowboy boots. They were handmade by Jimmy's grandfather, a master leather craftsman who had worked for the U.S. Army Quartermaster Corps during World War I. The grandfather had developed a special technique for waterproofing leather using beeswax and natural oils, a method superior to standard military issue. When Klaus wore those boots during his 2 years at Camp Hearn, other prisoners noticed they never cracked, never leaked, never deteriorated despite constant use. American quartermasters noticed too. They interviewed Klaus, learned about the boots, traced them back to Jimmy's grandfather's technique. That technique was studied, refined, and incorporated into military boot production in 1946. It became standard for American combat boots and remained in use until the 1980s, when synthetic materials replaced leather. Millions of soldiers wore boots using a waterproofing method derived from the pair Jimmy gave away. His grandfather's craftsmanship passed down through those boots literally protected American feet for 40 years. The connection was documented in Quartermaster Corps archives, but never publicized because it seemed too sentimental, too coincidental. But it happened. History is full of these strange circles. Klaus Weber's letter from 1983, the one asking about Jimmy McKinley, was eventually answered in 1987 by a military historian researching POW camps. The historian sent Klaus everything she could find: service records, a photograph of Jimmy, the commendation he received for training guards. Klaus died 3 months after receiving the package. His daughter, Anna Weber, visited Texas in 1990 and tracked down Jimmy's surviving family. She met Jimmy's nephew, Robert McKinley, who had inherited his great-grandfather's leather-working tools, but knew nothing about the boots. Anna told him the story. Robert did not believe her at first. It sounded too much like a movie. But Anna had documentation: her father's letters, the army records, photographs. Robert broke down crying. His uncle had been a mystery, a name on a memorial, a vague family story about dying in Germany. Now he understood. His uncle had started something that echoed through decades. From a 26-year-old ranch hand with a pair of hand-tooled boots to a policy that reshaped modern warfare and saved tens of thousands of lives. Jimmy McKinley proved that one person acting from simple decency rather than grand strategy can alter the course of history. He did not set out to change military doctrine. He did not plan to weaponize compassion. He just saw suffering and acted to relieve it. And because he did, hundreds of thousands of prisoners received humane treatment. Thousands of American soldiers received better intelligence that brought them home alive. An entire system of international law evolved to protect the vulnerable. His grandfather's boots walked further than anyone could have imagined across continents and generations, leaving footprints in history that will never fade. If you know stories like this, stories where ordinary people made extraordinary differences through simple acts of humanity, share them in the comments. History is not just made by generals and presidents. It is made by guards who give away their boots, by mechanics who keep them, by daughters who preserve their father's letters. This is one of hundreds of forgotten innovations from World War II. Moments where someone did something crazy that changed everything. Subscribe to this channel to discover more of these stories, because the most powerful lessons come from the people history almost forgot. And remember this: Jimmy McKinley never received a medal. His name appears on no monuments. But every time a prisoner is treated with dignity, every time mercy proves stronger than cruelty, his legacy lives. That is the power of choosing humanity, even when regulations say otherwise. Especially when regulations say otherwise, because sometimes the most revolutionary act is simply being kind.